Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of Fighters, Coaches, and Fathers. And it is my pleasure to introduce the 10-2 pro fighter and coach at Modern Martial Arts in Saskatoon, Tyson Steele. Tyson, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Jeff. Thanks. How are you?
Very good. It's going to be a really hot day here in Vancouver, and we got the windows open and the fans going. So I'm sure it's similar in Saskatoon.
Yeah, it's shaping up to be a pretty nice day here too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks again for taking the time, and I'm excited to talk to you. And we've spoke with Adam Lorenz and Kurt Southern, your partners over there at Modern Martial Arts. And we usually start out the interviews talking a little bit about the chronological sort of beginnings of Tyson Steele. Are you open to talk to me a little bit about growing up, your family's journey, and growing up in what I just found out, Carlisle, Saskatchewan, and I grew up or spent summers in Cardiff, Saskatchewan, which are very actually close to each other. But give me a little bit of understanding to sort of your growing up in the country, and we'll start there.
Yeah, of course. So, like I had mentioned earlier, I grew up in Carlisle, Saskatchewan, so a small town in southeast Saskatchewan, as you're familiar with, having spent some time in Cardiff. But yeah, it's a town of about now 1,300 people, if I'm not mistaken. At the time, maybe around 1,200. So it's really blown up in the last 10 years since I moved away. But yeah, it's pretty typical childhood there. Being in a small town like that, there's not quite the programs for sports and stuff like what you would see in the city. So we played hockey in the winters. I played pretty much any school sport that was offered. So there was only a handful of them, being like volleyball, badminton, track and field type thing. So
yeah, I remember that there was two types of people from Cardiff and Carlisle, and they were like either they were jocks and athletes, or they were like gearheads and car dudes that were really bad and they weren't even going to school, right? Like, and there was only about 10 kids, it seemed like, in the whole city at times. But
yeah,
so it's good to hear that you did
sport. The other kids that I grew up with, we would play hockey together, play volleyball together, be on the track and field team type thing, and it was always the same people.
There's this interesting sort of theory about small town growing up and in the farms, and there seems to be this thing where the smaller the town, the stronger and tougher the kids are, but they just don't seem to have the opportunities to move forward. Why do you think that is?
I don't know if I'd necessarily say the kids are tougher. I wasn't a tough kid anyway. I'll say that much. One thing that I do see with farm kids in particular is that they do a lot of manual labor from a very young age. So that's where you get the term like farmer strength from, right? So there's kids that are put to work for doing like very, very long days of manual labor over and over and over again. And kids who grow up doing that are tough as hell.
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of tough, probably.
Yeah, and it's sort of like you got it. And if it's farm work, it's like you got to go no matter what you're feeling like, or you're sick, because the cows got to get milk, the hay's got to get and you can't. There's no not going, right?
Yeah.
There's no calling in sick on the farm.
I didn't have the I wasn't forced to develop that. I didn't grow up on a farm, so. But a lot of the kids that I knew who grew up on farms, they were beasts.
Yeah. Well, talk to me. So how do you make the transition from hockey and volleyball in Carlisle, a city or a town or a hamlet of 1,300 people, to martial arts, and where you ended up being a pro fighter and one of the few people to actually beat one of the Gracies?
Sure. So like growing up and doing all those sports, I always enjoyed it, but I didn't love any one of them in particular, and I didn't necessarily excel at any one of them either. I was moderately good at a bunch of them, and come the end of the hockey season, I was always kind of happy that it was over. Same with any other sport that was going on, and it's kind of the way it was for me. I didn't really stand out in any of those sports. I wasn't a very athletic kid by any means. And by the time I was about 19 or so, I had some friends in Carlisle who were driving into White Bear Lake, which is a native reserve just north of Carlisle. So I spent my summers growing up at White Bear Lake. We have a cabin there. It's a beautiful place, and that's where I would spend, every summer of my life growing up. We would go move in there and spend a couple months, and then school would start and we'd come back. So there's actually a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt named Clarence Nickahood who started teaching classes at White Bear, and I had some friends who were going, and my one buddy who was attending classes, he's like, Tyson, this is awesome stuff. You got to come try out a class. He was bugging me to go, and eventually I did, and I was immediately hooked. I was amazed by what he was doing. I was like, this is magic. Like, I was hooked instantly after one class, and then I just kept going back, every class. I think it was probably a couple times a week at that time. So I wasn't necessarily a fan of MMA or martial arts or anything of that sort. To be honest, I had very, very briefly seen and followed mixed martial arts before that. I wouldn't even say I followed it. I had seen it. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. I didn't know why people were doing it. That was the end of it. I started doing jiu-jitsu, and then I was immediately hooked. So I was attending this school for about a year before I moved into Saskatoon for school.
So, okay, let's go back. So you're doing volleyball, you're doing hockey, you're not in love with them. You go out to White Bear, you meet Clarence and a few other people from Regina, other people that were coming down there. Was White Bear on a native reserve?
Yeah, this is a native reserve just north of Carlisle.
And I mean, we deal with a lot of people in PA, and there's a lot of good, at least native amateurs and some pros out there. Waterhen comes to mind. Talk to me. I mean, what was it like training on a reserve? Was there any sort of, I mean, whenever I've been there, I used to work at Paul Dojak Youth Center, and I've actually been inside sweats and had experiences in there, and I've loved my times on the reserve. And I think more, when I say people like us should go do that, what was it like training on a reserve?
Honestly, it's just like training at any other gym, man. Like, one of the beautiful things about jiu-jitsu is that it just brings people together no matter what their profession, their background, their walk of life is. You can share the mats with, doctors and lawyers and people who have been brought up from any other, walk of life. So once you're together on the mat, you're just training. It was just like any other school. I've been to dozens of different jiu-jitsu schools, and they're all the same. There's just a certain way about them where when you're there, that's all anyone's really focused on. All the bullshit that goes on outside in your life, whatever it may be, it's just forgotten about for that 60, 90 minutes, and you're just training, having fun, and getting better together. And it's no different on the White Bear Reserve either. It was just
it's awesome. Okay, so and there's, you start to fall in love with the sport. What happens next?
Yeah, so I was doing jiu-jitsu at White Bear. At the time I was traveling to, I would do a couple tournaments and things like that as a white belt at, like, training out of White Bear. And then I had moved to Saskatoon for school. So of course, the first thing that I had sought out was a gym to train at. Like that was my thing at this point, was training, right? So we had actually the team from White Bear had actually been in Regina to watch MMA bouts like a couple months before I was set to move. There was the old UMC fights in Regina.
Yeah, I commented some of those.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, those were fun. So at this one particular event, there was Saskatoon fighters fighting other Saskatoon fighters. It was like a gym versus gym thing. There was like 2 matches going on where it was Saskatoon versus Saskatoon, and both fighters from this one gym beat fighters from this other gym. So this was Kurt and Adam, the fighters from Saskatoon. So I watched that and I was like, well, if I'm going to choose a gym to train at in Saskatoon where they're doing jiu-jitsu, I'm going to go to where these guys are winning, right?
Right. So that's your business partners, Adam Lorenz and Kurt Southern, who we've interviewed on the show.
I had seen them fight in UMC in probably 2006, and that's kind of what pointed me in the direction of the gym they were training at. So literally, when I moved to Saskatoon that September, pulled into the house I was staying at, dumped off my bags and drove to the gym, signed up, and started training that night. So I wasn't even unpacked yet, and I was training. So I began training jiu-jitsu. It was at Lions Training Center in Saskatoon.
And how old are you here?
19.
19. And then yeah. And then I think the next time you really start to shine is in Evolution.
Yeah, so I moved to Saskatoon, joined this gym with the intention of training jiu-jitsu. But as I've seen, these guys are also doing MMA. So they're doing Muay Thai, they're doing jiu-jitsu, they're doing no-gi jiu-jitsu, and then they're competing in MMA. So being at this gym, I just started training in those disciplines as well. But I really didn't I didn't train very long before I took my first fight. I moved to Saskatoon in September, and I fought in February in Regina in an MMA fight. I took an MMA fight. I was in school one day, and my coach text messaged me. He said, "There's a guy that we can set you up to fight in February if you want." So I was like, I hadn't really considered the possibility of me fighting MMA time until I was asked to do it. I was just training, having fun, enjoying it. So I said to myself, yeah, I'll just do it once as like a bucket list type item to experience it. Let's do it. I was training constantly anyway. Every night I was training super hard, sparring with these other fighters. So I was already putting in the work. I thought, why not have a goal to go along with that? So I did it, and I ended up winning with a rear naked choke in under a minute. It was very fast, fun fight, and then I was hooked. Like if I wasn't hooked on jiu-jitsu bad enough before, now I was really, really hooked into MMA. So I was like, that was amazing. Let's do this again as soon as possible. I fought again.
It's interesting, Tyson, because you seem to talk about, you had this love of jiu-jitsu. Then there's an opportunity to take a fight, and you take that fight, but you're kind of like, I don't know if this is my thing.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and then you get to that moment that you're like, hey, I really like this. It's a bit of a different path from what we hear other people. They're like for example, Curtis Spring and Brad Katona, the first time he was asked, are you ready for this fight? He says, I was ready when I accepted it. Like, he's kind of like a little bit crazy. So that's an interesting path. So it sounds, let me ask you.
I didn't join the gym with the intention of being a fighter.
Right.
I joined the gym with the intention on training, just loving learning.
Right.
Training that came along with it. The the competition was basically a byproduct of it at that time. And then once I experienced it, then I was a fan and I loved it. I would go as far as saying I wasn't even an MMA fan until I started fighting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And so, and I'm gonna ask this question because I find it interesting, and I know your level of success. We're going to talk about it, but in that first fight, it sounds, I don't want to say you're casual, but your mentality was like, well, we'll just see what happens. Because I guess you probably wouldn't know much about your opponent. You couldn't tell if the guy is going to be a monster or anything. You're like, I'll get in here, I'll do the best I can. But it sounds like you didn't have this do or die mentality in that first fight.
Aside from how I described it, once I accepted the fight, I did have a do or die mentality. I was training ridiculously hard, and I had trained ridiculously hard for all of my fights.
Right.
Even before I accepted the fight, I was training ridiculously hard, which is I believe why my coach offered a fight to me. When I started competing, that was 100% of my focus in life.
Okay.
I didn't dedicate my time to anything else outside of fighting.
Yeah, that's the impression I have of you. For every time I met you, so I just wanted to confirm it because I was like, what's he talking about here? Because Tyson's a bit of a monster and he doesn't keep going. So you take your first fight, you win rear naked choke under a minute, you're off the wall, you're losing your mind. Now you become an MMA fan because you're good at it.
Yeah.
And the path begins for you.
Yeah, so I was addicted right then and there. I fought again, probably a few months after that, and then again a few months after that, and again a few months after that. I fought four times in about a year, and then I got hurt. I tore a ligament in my knee, so I had to deal with that for a little bit. Then I came back and continued training and fighting, and yeah.
And your path towards was the Evolution tournament or the chance of the belt?
Yeah, so I can't recall what year I started fighting in the EFC. I think I was maybe 4-0. I think after I fought 4 times and then got hurt, when I came back, I moved from welterweight to lightweight, I think. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I fought for their lightweight title my first fight with them. So I was fighting at 155 pounds.
How much do you weigh now, man? I can't imagine you at 155 pounds. What do you?
Well, it was pretty rough. I would at that time I would walk around at about 185 pounds.
Okay.
So I would cut from 185 to I would weigh in at 155, and then
that's a pro cut, man.
Yeah, and I made weight every time. Then what happened was, after that first time cutting from 185 to 155, then my weight just yo-yoed way up, and my walking around weight was then in the 190s. I actually got super heavy, and then I would cut again for lightweight, and then it would yo-yo way back up, and my walking around weight would then be a little bit higher.
Oh,
it was a really bizarre, probably horribly unhealthy thing that I was doing to myself. But that's what happened. So those cuts at lightweight began to get more and more difficult each time. So I only did that for a few years, and then I decided it was time to move back up to welterweight.
Right.
To avoid doing that to myself. So by the time that I was ready to move back up to welterweight again, I think I was cutting from like 190 to 195 type thing, down to 155. So those cuts just got harder and harder and harder and harder.
And so you trained for EFC as a lightweight and as a welterweight?
Yeah, so I did several fights for them as a lightweight, and I won their lightweight belt, and then I moved up to a welterweight, and I actually won their welterweight belt. So I had their lightweight and their welterweight belt.
Champ.
Yeah.
Right on.
And it was I think I fought once more for a different organization before I got a contract with the World Series of Fighting.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So that's the big one, and I think in terms of underdogs, as far as underdogs go, when you see odds, and I don't know if there were odds on the World Series of Fighting, I'm sure there were, but you're fighting one of the Gracies,
Mhm.
and tell me about getting that call, the process of that fight itself, and then during the fight, what starts to happen, and then the result.
Sure. So yeah, I got a call from my manager at the time with this opportunity for this tournament that was coming up. So initially, the World Series of Fighting, what they had planned to do was have a welterweight and a lightweight tournament. So they had their brackets set up, and they were going to play it out tournament style. So that's what I was preparing for. Same opponent. It was Gregor Gracie who was offered to me from right from the beginning. As time went on, for whatever reason, their tournament format fell through, so they were just going to do like regular bouts, right? So yeah, like you said, I was definitely a big underdog. There was some betting lines on it, and it wasn't too good for me at the time. Early into the fight, you could see why I was in some serious trouble pretty early on in the fight. But midway through the first round, I was able to turn it around and beat Gregor. So it was a big upset at the time for sure.
So you go in. There's some struggles during that fight. Is your mind blank, like realizing, okay, here's where I'm at? Are you just defaulting down to instinct and training, and this is where we're going to go to, and then you're kind of getting hit and like, oh no, I'm in trouble, and then there's a switch where you're like, oh geez, I'm in a good position? Or how do you?
Yeah, so early in the fight, he pressed me up against the cage, and this is something I remember vividly. He took wrist control, and I was like, oh my god, this is the beefiest wrist control I've ever felt. Like I felt completely fucked as soon as he grabbed my wrist. It was like, that thing is yours now. I'm not getting that wrist back. He stuffed it between my legs and hauled me out with a single leg takedown, and then he started working to a head and arm triangle from mount, and that thing was tight. Like I was very, very close to going out at that time, and he ended up bailing on me to attack an armbar from mount, and that was one attack that I was very, very good at defending. So if you watch the fight, as soon as he sits back for the armbar, I switched my hips over hard as he was going back to take a top position and stack him. So I was putting a lot of top pressure on him, which would allow me the time to free my elbow. As soon as that elbow came free, then I was in a top position and I was able to hit him. So that's what turned it around, is my armbar defense.
Mm. Amazing. And so you get through it, you end up winning the fight. What do you feel like then?
Honestly, at that point, it was just like any other fight. Like I really didn't approach it too differently than any other fight. I mean, it was there was a lot more media attention around it and stuff like that. So afterwards, there was a lot more people who had seen it that reached out to me to say congrats and things like that, which was super cool. But really, it was just like any other fight, aside from the publicity that surrounded it.
Yeah, interesting. And what we'll do is we'll get we'll connect it. I think it's online, and we'll put it on there so people can actually see exactly what's happening. And I'm going to look for that wrist control to see if I can see, because I can imagine I had that kind of thing happen. You're like, what is going on? Did I lock my wrist in a cage? Like, what just happened? And sometimes when you're dealing with guys like that with that grip strength, you're like, oh man, this is going to be a long night.
No, that definitely stuck out from that fight.
Let's I love it. And now you are one of the head coaches over at Martin Martial Arts Center in Saskatoon. in that transition. But you guys were you guys business partners in opening that gym then, or did that happen after?
We did it together. Yeah, there's four of us who opened it together. So we basically approach it with the idea, like a lot of ideas coming together, and that we really, really felt that we could do some stuff that's much better for ourselves and much better for a community that we were hoping to build in the city. And so we basically just went for it. I was approached by Kurt and Adam with the idea of starting our own thing, and I didn't really spend much time thinking about it, to be honest. I have known these guys for so long, and their passion with the sport, how involved they are with the sport. So I trained alongside them for so many years that I just knew on a very, very deep level that people that do that train and compete at a professional level are able to, set some goals and then take the proper steps to meet those goals. It's something that you understand, very thoroughly when you are training for fights, and when you see other people do it. It's like, this guy can dedicate himself solely to one goal. So it was a no-brainer for me when I asked myself, will this thing work? Could we, make this place successful? I knew that we would be able to. And it didn't take very long for us to have opened Modern Martial Arts Center, for us to feel like it was a very successful place.
Yeah, and to your guys' credit, there's one thing to have a successful gym, and then there's one thing to have a sellout event in MFC, the first one you guys had, and have fights that you guys had. Like, I mean, we were commentating that event, and I was like, oh my God, half the time, like, it was such a good event, and to see that support, that city was hungry for that, and you guys filled that need, and it looks, hopefully we'll see the next one in September, October this year. Maybe we'll get Kurt out there too, right?
Maybe. I'm not going to answer that for him, but maybe.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm going to do a little bit of word association just in a little bit to sort of close us off. But before we do that, one of the questions that I always find interesting, people that we're doing interviews with, is what's one of the most useful lessons that you learned from your father or your mother that's sort of been a guiding principle for you moving forward into the success that you've had?
Yeah, so that's a good question. One of the lessons that I learned from my dad, I picked up as a kid, just being with him in Carlisle. So I remember very vividly, just walking down Main Street in Carlisle with my dad as a young kid. And when people would see him, they'd just light up, stop, say hello, be friendly, chat with one another, and then we just go about our way. And he'd bump into other people in the town. They'd light up, they'd smile, shake hand, ask how are you, and just be very, very friendly with one another. So what I learned from that was that every interaction that my dad seemed to have with people was always very friendly and happy, and as time went on, people just enjoyed him being around. So that's one of the things that I try to make an effort to do when I see people out and about is just chat with them and just try to brighten their day just a little bit if I can. And that's something that sounds very, very simple and obvious as a thing to do when you say it, but it's something that I picked up on that I may not have learned if I had a dad who was a prick.
Yeah. What a switch. I love that, and I think you're right, and I think that you embody that lesson, because Mike Ditka said it once, and whenever I watch your interviews and the things that you do, you say it's hard to put your finger on what it is about Tyson Steele, but he's classy. Like he just is professional and he says the right stuff, and you want to listen to the way he does stuff. And I think that you probably, I feel that you really embody that, and you have a sense of class that is uncommon in mixed martial arts. And I just want to say that's a great lesson, and it's nice to hear that you learned that from your father.
I would agree. Thanks. You would probably appreciate that too.
Let's play some word association real quick. First of all, what's your favorite vice?
Oh man, I've got plenty. If I was to choose a favorite, probably chocolate.
Dark chocolate or white chocolate?
Yes, any chocolate.
Understood.
Chocolate. It was. It's almost to the point where it's a problem where I have to take leave from it if I eat too much of it.
From one champ evaluating another champ, Daniel Cormier.
Oh man, I love Daniel Cormier. I nearly shed a few tears when he won the other weekend. It was such a great guy to see have that success that he deserves. It's wonderful to see.
Yeah. We our group, we won a lot of money on that fight because we were like, what do you, I mean, I love Stipe. Stipe's great, but he's never fought a wrestler like Cormier. And if you follow back Cormier's rise to the key, he asked for the fight. Well, I'm bored. I want to, and you're like, Stipe's like, well, I'm not going to back down. And you're like, you're not going to wrestle him, but then to knock him out, you're just like, what?
Yeah, to finish him that way.
All right, let's do a bit of a transition and let's go Chuck Tito.
I love it. You know what? That's funny that comes to mind. I'm gonna definitely watch it. I'll tune in. I'll watch it. I'll enjoy it. Hopefully. That was one of the first UFC fights that I remember watching in high school. So I had seen some of the very old UFCs and then kind of forgotten about them. But then one of my friends in high school was renting a pay-per-view one weekend, and that's one of like the first fights that I recall watching was one of Chuck and Tito's fights in probably in 2000 or early 2000s. I can't recall the year, but now to see them fight again so many years later is going to be interesting.
Oh, I love how I can't catch you in anything, man. You got to go into politics. I love it. You're such a good guy. I'm like, come on, say something mean. But I love it. I feel the same way. I'll watch it too. I don't think they're in their prime, but I think there's interesting stuff to it, and maybe there's something that interesting that can happen. Having said that, it's a tough gig to make money in. Yeah, so I'm all for fighters making more money.
There's guys who are fighting out of their prime, which these two definitely are. I prefer that they do it with one another, so get guys out of their prime fighting one another, two legends fighting one another, rather than feeding these guys to some hungry young kid coming up.
Yeah, you're exactly right on that. Fourth one, this podcast is called Fighters, Coaches, and Fathers, and you are all three. The birth of your daughter, Ray.
That was amazing. Yeah, everyone who I know has kids. It's going to be great. It's going to be amazing. You're going to love it. So on, and everyone was exactly right. Everyone said that there'll be challenges. There's going to be a lot of special moments, things like that, which, of course, that was all expected and true. One of the things that I noticed right away that no one told me would happen was how much more love and respect I could actually have for my wife after seeing her not just give birth, but then start to raise our daughter. So she's been absolutely wonderful through the whole process and continues to do so. I don't know how she does it, how she continues to do it, but it's pretty special to watch.
Amazing.
And, yeah, it's pretty special, not just to watch, but also be a part of.
Awesome. Tyson, thanks so much for taking the time. If people want to go and train with you guys, where do they get to? How do they get in touch with you? We'll put some of your highlights down on the end of the show here. But
Modern Martial Arts Center. Type it into your web browser, you'll find us. whether it be our website or our listing on Google or our website. Facebook or website or our Google listing. It's got all of our information, our schedule, class times, contact info. It's all on there.